everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the writer of comics like Where Monsters Lie, Peacemaker Tries Hard, the upcoming Avengers Unleashed, and the Eisner-nominated I Hate This Place. It's Kyle Starks. Thanks for coming on, Kyle.
That's me. I'm Kyle Starks. Thanks for having me, David. It's always a treat. It's always a joy. It's always a pleasure.
I just want to say congrats both on the well-deserved Eisner nomination and the new business cards touting that. For people who don't know, which is most of you, you actually got new business cards that say, what is it, 3-time Eisner nominated Kyle Starks?
So here's the story of my cards, is if you do conventions, people like to go around and just ask for cards. Like they're collecting.
Do they?
Yes. They're like, oh, I'm not going to buy anything, but do you have a business card? It's like, I hate it. I hate it. Because I think these people have like some sort of like murder conspiracy wall of like business cards, like just business cards, like their weird business card collection. And I didn't want to contribute to that. So I made a business card that said 2-time Eisner nominee, so big you can't make out anything else on it besides maybe my name. Like you can't make out my website or my Twitter. You can't make anything else on it. It's like, haha, isn't that funny? The bigger joke was I just got nominated for 2 more Eisners if you count anthologies. So I had to make a new card that says 3-time Eisner nominee asterisk 4 if you count anthologies.
Right, because it's Creepshow, right?
Yeah, Creepshow got a nomination. Very good Creepshow.
Not to have schadenfreude for your career, but I do want to say it. Like last time you were on, you were talking about how you wanted to escape the humor designation. I genuinely laughed when I saw that I Hate This Place was nominated for Best Humor Publication. You cannot escape comedy.
A conversation I have a lot because it's interesting to me. Also, my least funny book, I would say unintentionally.
It's still funny, but
I would say I'm not saying it's not funny, but it's like, to me, that's not a comedy. It's not a humor publication. You know what I mean? So it's super funny to me. But what I think is interesting about I Hate This Place, because the response I got was a lot of early stuff was like, it's really funny. And I'm like, it's a little funny. And to me, it's not funny. It's charming. These characters are charming so that you don't want anything bad to happen to them. And I think that the way that I sort of process what's charming and what's not is by a degree of humor. So it is a little bit funny. I mean, in the first issue, there's a bit where Gabby, who's very optimistic, is like, oh, I can't wait to name all these cows. And Trudy, who's very practical, is like, do not name those cows. Like, do not get attached to those cows, right? To me, like, that's charming. It's not hilarious. But the thing is like, I Hate This Place is hands down my best-selling book, right? Non-IP. It's not Rick and Morty. It's my best-selling book, so it's a ton of people who are just seeing my voice for the first time. And it's like the most subdued version of my voice in many ways. So pretty interesting.
I do think it's interesting, though, because I wonder how much of that is like a sliding scale. Because, to be honest, if we're just talking about charm is not something that's normally imbued into a lot of comics. And so I think your work naturally radiates that charm where it's like these characters are fun to be around and stuff like that, even though they're going through hell. And because of that, you kind of get lumped in there just because it's relative to everything else. Do you think that's part of it?
Yeah, for sure. I think so, for sure. And like I said, I think I like to be around people who amuse me, who entertain me. And so I think like when I'm like, oh, I think it's really important. Even if you don't like a character, I think I really want people to want to spend time with them. With all my books, that's my goal with all my books. My intention is like, I want people to want to see what happens to this person for 120 pages or whatever. And even if they're unlikable, like Trigger Keaton, I want them to be like, I kind of want to see what happens to this guy. Like I want to be in their presence. But I think so. That's my thing. Is like, it's just, I think bits, in many ways. But I'm trying not to use the word comedy anymore. I'm trying not to use it.
I'm curious. I don't really know how the Eisners work. I actually don't even submit my stuff.
I have a vague idea.
Okay, so you didn't submit this, did you?
Skybound would have submitted it.
Did they submit it for Best Humor Publication, or was it just slotted based off of?
No, I think the publishers get to submit like 2 books per category, depending on the category. This is my understanding. I could be wrong. Tweet at me. Don't tweet at me. I don't care if I'm wrong. But my understanding is always like the publishers are limited to how many submissions they can make per category. But like for 6 Sidekicks and Old Head, which I should have been nominated for both, let's be honest, is that Schweitzer I know submitted 6 Sidekicks, and I submitted because like anyone could submit anything for Eisner consideration, but I think they really only pay attention if it's from a publisher. I could be wrong about that. But you have to think their bandwidth is like, how many books are they reading?
Oh my
God, that's a lot. It's a lot to ask of someone, and it's not the same people every year, which is great. but it's also like I'm sure there's people being sort of relearning every year, and it's why there's no real consistency in the Eisners in terms of nominations. But then who's voting, right? Stores, retailers are voting. Like it's a weird collection.
Creators.
Creators, if they sign up, like I don't think I'm registered to vote because I think hey maybe I'll take a look. I'm like I don't think I'm registered. So it's like you have to make like that's the thing. Like who gets that approval? I don't know. I don't know. But of those people, how many people like do the retailers vote past those first six? You know what I mean? Like, are they like, well, we should? Here's my opinion on best design. Says
Right.
like 3/4 of the stores in America because I bet they don't. I bet they're just like best writer, best artist, best series, best continuing. And then you kind of stop. And that's why I think like first second wins. I think first second. I think Kate Beaton was with first second when she defeated me, and I think Tom Gauld was with first second when he defeated me. Tom Gauld's up again this year, so I don't know what the betting pool is, but he did it before. I think that's why those books tend to win, because I think that circle of comicdom votes for everything. Like they're actually so their votes get bigger as like it's like best reissue of a foreign publication. It's like those guys know what that is. The other people don't care. I don't know. Who knows?
They're better at the get out the vote stuff. I do sometimes wonder what the impact of the Eisners is, though, just because it used to feel like a big deal. It doesn't, I mean, besides the fact that it was very controversial this year for understandable reasons.
Yes.
I don't know if something wins best continuing series and it's like all of a sudden sales really jump or something like that.
I think there's probably a sales bump for certain things. Listen, I buy stuff off the Eisners every year. And that might be, I do because if something's up for like best limited series and I've never heard of it, like I'll check it out because what's it hurt for me to check it out? And like my bandwidth is so small. But like if it looks like something's interesting, if it's a creator that I've liked previous work, I'll check it out. I think there's a small bump. I think when Rock Candy Mountain got nominated, I think when Sex Castle got nominated, though Sex Castle was OGN only, so it was sort of like people reminding people it existed. Because when you go straight to OGN and in the direct market, you kind of only exist for 30 days. Like it's kind of a tough when there wasn't that sort of people had months to sort of like live with these characters and think about these characters. So it kind of was like a reminder it existed. I think Rock Candy Mountain was kind of the same thing because sales weren't terribly bad for issue one, volume one, because at that time Image was all like those things sold like crazy. So it's kind of a reminder, it's like, remember that thing? And so I got a little bump sales wise. It wasn't huge, but any if I get 20 more readers, like that's dope, like it's worth it for that. And it's the best award. Sorry, other awards. Like that's the one you want. The other awards are nice, but like you want an Eisner.
Yeah, there's a reason why they call it the comic Oscars, but I feel like this is going to be kind of awkward, but it's a setup for a larger conversation and ties into a thought I had when I was considering this week's comics and how excited I was for Peacemaker Tries Hard came out this week. I Hate This Place came out this week. You've had a number of big books coming out. I think you're my favorite writer right now, Kyle. I had that realization. I think you're my favorite. And I feel like you're on a major heater. Like you're on Jason Tatum's 51-point Game 7 in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Definitely not Jason Tatum's ankle sprain in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference finals, but that 51-point outburst. That's where you're at right now. Does it feel like that? Do you feel like you're in a particularly good flow and that everything is working for you in a notable way? Or does it just feel like normal because you're kind of in the mix all the time?
No, it's funny. I think I was talking to an editor. I can't remember which one, either Alex at Skybound, who I talk to fairly often, or maybe, and it's like I'm 46. I've been doing this professionally for 6 years. I think I'm doing my best work maybe 2 months ago. Which I wouldn't have thought, because I look at my early stuff and Sex Castle, Rock Candy Mountain. Old Head was sort of an early book. So it's sort of fun. And I think I'm like, man, like I feel like I was on a different level, just in terms of concept and execution and how unique. But Where Monsters Lie, I Hate This Place. I think I'm doing something interesting with this Marvel book. I think Peacemaker is a really strong representation of what people want from that show. And parallel to that, like that show is very much what I do. So it's like, it's very easy for me to do Peacemaker, right? Because it's very much what I do. So I feel like right now I'm doing my best work. And I'm also the busiest I've ever been. So that probably lines up. Like I'm hoping it's not the best period, that it's like the first part or the middle part of my best period.
Right.
If that makes sense.
It's the step before the step is what you're hoping for.
Well, I'm hoping, like, I just feel like everything I'm doing right this minute, I'm really proud of. And everything that's came out, Where Monsters Lie was like, I went to 3 publishers before Dark Horse was like, yeah, we'll do this. Because I was like, this will be really good. I know it will be. As you grow creatively, it's like a new wall that you build for yourself, a new problem that you make for yourself. Early, it's like, well, you just want someone to let you make it. But now I'm at the point where it's like I'm very anxious about things being good enough. And this has been kind of going on since I Hate This Place started, which was the pandemic, which is like I'm very anxious about, is this good enough? Is this good enough? And with Where Monsters Lie is very breezy for me, and Peacemaker is very breezy for me. And like these are my best work is when I don't sweat it. And those early works, like that was 100% the case. When I did Sex Castle, I could not care what people like. I could not care. I just want to make something I thought was great. And Rock Candy Mountain is the same thing. It's like I think these are really good ideas. I want to make something that I like, and I 100% do. So it's the same thing. It's like I'm trying to find this, like trying to be easier or breezier about it because I feel like it's better work, but I'm very fixated on the caliber right now and trying to keep it high. More good ideas. He needs more clever ideas, more likable characters. Don't stop. Do something different, but do something familiar. It's interesting and frustrating just because and it's something that I'm interested in creatively is that each tier of success, like a former thing that was such a big problem goes away and a new problem arises that's just as bad somehow that you never had to even think of before.
Give me an example then.
I mean, like early on, it's like, please, I just I want someone to make this book. And I would just make the books and I would try to find something. I mean, at that point, like I would do Sex Castle, I did Kill Them All.
I mean, you kickstarted both of those before they got published, right?
Yeah. And then it's like, I want to find a publisher to do it. And then you find a publisher and then it's like, oh, I want to do this full time. At that point, like the hobby, and it's like, no, I'd like to do this full time, but I need work. It's like, well, here's Rick and Morty. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to need more work after this. It's like, oh, Rick and Morty worked out. I did it for 5 years and I was able to do other stuff around it because you find the rhythm. So now it's like, and it's like, oh man, so then there's a level where you're like, oh my gosh, I have to write 2 books at the same time. Like that's the problem. But it's hard creatively to live in 2 different worlds for me. So it's like, oh, I have to figure out how to go back and forth because I like to exist within these worlds. So like full focus, and only see when I'm in it, I can see angles that I wouldn't see otherwise. And now they're like, oh, now I figure out how to do this and that. So you go like, oh man, I wish someone would do my work. And you're like, oh, now you have people get your work. And then it's like, oh, now a bunch of people, now too many people want my work. And I don't have enough like good stuff, like because I'm too spread thin. And it's like, what if I don't have 3 publishers asking me for work ever again a year from now, 6 months from now? What if the Marvel and DC things don't work out? And if they don't, I mean, like I could understand why either one of those could not work out for me. I hope they do because I think it's really interesting. And I think that's really important to sort of be successful in comics in America, that you have to have a big 2 run. And maybe it's Peacemaker for me. It very well could be. Who knows? But it's like, so those things, like it's always a new worry. It's always a new level. It's just like when you're doing shows. I remember like going to shows and it's like, what do you mean? Like you didn't have to pay for your table? I'm like, no, I didn't pay for my table. And you're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait till I don't have to pay for a table.
Yeah.
And then you get to the point where you have to pay for a table and someone's like, oh yeah, which hotel you're staying at? It's like, oh, the one they put you up in a hotel. You know, it's like everything's like that. It's like as it's growing, but then the more successful, it's like you're not just bringing like 2 boxes of books. It's like now you have to figure out the math of your table, and it's like everything's a new. Each level is a new problem. And like I said, hashtag success problems. It's like you have too many publishers wanting your work, but it's like these are relationships. It's like it's just one more thing. Like I have relationships with these publishers, and I want to give them work, but I can physically only do so much at a time, and it's also balancing schedules. To think about guys like, especially those guys who come in hot for the big 2, like Donnie's doing 7 books or whatever. He's doing 3 books a month when he's doing that minimum. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's minimum. Like just the math of that. On top of he had like 3 other creator-owned series that were maybe wrapping up. Maybe he was already done with them. But even when they're wrapping up, you still have to approve pages every day. You still have to deal with the artist. You still have to do a proofread. It's so much work. And the thing is like, man, it's so much work. And like that's the thing is like it all comes with different stuff. And of course, Donnie and Matt Rosenberg had great Twitter reactions that no one wants to deal with for that sort of big 2 success. And so everything has new problems. It's a job. And that's the thing is that you think at some point it's going to be easy. And I think maybe at some point it is. And it's probably a completely different, it's rich people problems at that point, right? You're like, what am I supposed to do with this money? Who knows how you invest money? That's where you want to be. But that's a small percentage of comics. And so it's just like trying to figure out how to work with whatever the new problem is. And you're always learning. It's all just getting better too, which is scary.
I do think it's interesting, though, where you're at a point where you've had this work. Like I Hate This Place was your most successful project so far.
Yeah.
You had Where Monsters Lie, which was a really tight, very good 4-issue run.
Yeah, and sold out. It's sold out. Every issue sold out.
And it was great. I mean, I saw Chris Conroy talk about the fact that DC Black Label, I believe, group editor Chris Conroy said that Six Sidekicks of Trigger Keaton was one of the main reasons why he was all about you doing the Peacemaker book. And at a certain point, I feel like your books, one tier at one level, your books start doing the advertising for you and start being like the pitch. It's like, this is Kyle Starks' business card, and it doesn't say 3-time Eisner nominee. And I don't know. I mean, like, do you feel like the perception about you or interest in you as a writer is changing?
I don't know, man. I will say, because like when you said that earlier to that, I might be your favorite writer. I saw someone tweet today, and I've seen this a couple times, and like, I'm a tangent to the conversation where they're like, oh, I think Kyle Starks is now like buy on site. If I see a Kyle Starks book, I'm just going to buy it.
Sure.
And to me, who did Sex Castle and Kill Them All and Mars Attacks and no one read, it's just like, really? Like, that's a crazy compliment. That's better than the Eisners. If 10 people said I'm going to buy you, that's better than the Eisners. Because like for me, I have those people. I have my creators, all right? I have the directors who I will see their movies irregardless. And I have comic creators who I buy the books. The Swedish cartoonist Jason, I buy his books no matter what. Sometimes I don't think they're the best. Sometimes I'm a little disappointed. But guess what? I still buy the next one. To get that is a huge compliment. The thing with being a creative person, I always worry about saying things because I feel like I'm pulling back the curtain that's going to make me suffer somehow. The thing about being a creative person is that, one, you do have to be good. Like being good and me, I'm trying to get better with every book. One of the books I'm doing right now, I'm like, this is a little rushed, it's a little tight, but it's a mini series. It's 4 issues, 80 pages. Like you can only do so much. And I'm like, I got all my stuff in there. I can only hope when people consume it, it lands the way I hope it will, right? But the thing with being successful creatively is all you can do is keep making work and hope people find out about it. Someone keeps saying it's good and that you're validated. That's what that DC Marvel run is for direct comics in America, is like, that's validation. Mm-hmm. Because everyone who's huge in comics, there's very few exceptions, had a long run in Marvel or DC, are a good run. And there's something about that. It's like, oh, they made it. You're real now. Like you're real now. And I think following that up with good work, it puts you in a situation where at some point, it doesn't matter how good the book is. It only matters who you are. And people just assume it will be good, right? And that's what every creative person aspires to, because that's the point where you're selling things, where everyone has agreed, like, what you make is good. I'm not there. I'm not. There's no way. If I am, they're holding money back. Like, I know I'm not. But that's what you aspire to be. You aspire, and that's weird because I listen to this podcast. I listen to Fly on the Wall podcast, which is Dana Carvey and David Spade, and they talk about SNL stuff. I was listening to this interview today, and they're talking about how when they were coming up, it's like, oh, I'm good. Why are these better people like headlining stand-up shows and what? And the one guy, the advice he was given, which I think is so good and true, which they're like, don't worry about those other people. Be so good that they can't not take you. Be so good it's undeniable. But in the meantime, be as good for yourself. Like, and I think that's all you can do. That's all I can do is keep making books that I think are really good, that I hope I want that validation only because I want more readers. Like, I'm not making books. I say this all the time in every interview. I'm not making stories for the void. Like, I'm just not that guy. I'm making them to be consumed. I'm wanting to entertain people. I want to bring joy or sadness or terror. I want people to feel things. I want to be responsible in this awful, awful world, like this terrible existence that for 15 minutes when you read that comic, you're like, that was good. That's all I want. That's all I want in my life at this age, 46. And I would love to also not be worried about my bills 6 months from now, like that's it. But I'm just like, I just want to tell stories. And if you really, I want to tell stories for people to read. Like, that's literally why I'm making them. There's no other reason. So I'm doing these things and I'm trying to be like, well, what's the Kyle Starks version of a DC book? What's the Kyle Starks version of a Marvel book? Because my voice is different. And I don't want to give up that voice, but I do also want to give fans of the Pet Avengers, for example, I very much want to give them what they want. I very much want the people who love Pet Avengers, which is probably a smaller than average group of consumers, I would suspect, to be like, that was a great book, but it's going to be different because I want it to still be my book. And Marvel had goals for the book that were different too, but that's neither here nor there. So yeah, it's weird. I don't know if I'm there, man, but I think issue 1 of I Hate This Place sold like 32,000. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's
Mhm.
crazy. And I think my publisher said issue 7 sold 7,000. And like, that's great for comics. Like, for comics, that's really good for an issue 7. That's 7,000 people. I think issue 8 of Rock Candy Mountain sold 800 copies. So it's like, that's a long
Whoa.
path, right? That's a
Yeah.
long path. And certainly, like, I did, like, Rick and Morty sold really well, but no one read it. It wasn't a book that people read. Like, they just collected it.
Well, and beyond that, it's also not really, I say this with respect, they're not really reading it for you.
Not at all. Not at all. But I did do the best work on it. That should have been nominated for an Eisner. 5 years I did that. No Eisner, come on.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Summer is coming fast and furious, and so are the campaigns on Zoop, the crowdfunding platform. June launches include Stardust, the Super Wizard Anthology, which features an all-star team of artists and writers like Mike Allred, Francesco Francavilla, and Cecil Castellucci, a La Borncana Volume 1 hardcover from Edgardo Miranda Rodriguez, and more. Also, there's still time to support Jason Copeland's indie hit Full Tilt, as well as Jorge Molina's gorgeous art book, Zerdo, among many other campaigns that are currently live. It takes less than 30 seconds to sign up, and the e-commerce style checkout is easy and intuitive. Add multiple rewards and add-ons into your cart, provide some info during the checkout, and you're done. No confusing additional steps in finalizing your pledge, and no post-campaign surveys. For creators looking to crowdfund their project, Zoop is currently open for submissions. Email them at hello@wearezoop.com to start a campaign. And now, back to the show. I do want to bring up one thing that I think is interesting. You already kind of referenced this, but I remember when Peacemaker Tries Hard came out, and also even when it was announced to some degree, where people were talking about like the James Gunn kind of overlap, where it was like, I forgot what they were saying, like your writing kind of has like a James Gunn vibe to it on the book. But I do think the interesting thing about it is I kind of think you were already doing a James Gunn thing anyways, because you have similar storytelling vibes. Like everything is at least slightly comedic. You work horror in a fair bit. You love action. You love big action idiots. And you both kind of came of age in the 80s, so that makes sense. But I do think it's interesting that, I don't know, I mean, I feel like we're at a time in comics where a James Gunn vibe is particularly well received, and that's just the Kyle Starks vibe too.
I hope so. I hope that's true, because I'm stuck being me, you know. I'm stuck being me. Somebody tweeted, like, or some even journalists, I can't remember, they're like, this is perfect casting. And it's like, yeah, like I did a Great Lakes Avengers comic for like the web series. Like I love the Great Lakes Avengers, but I only love the John Byrne Great Lakes Avengers. I only love like 3 appearances of them, and sort of hate everything after that. So they go, oh, what would you do? What would you do? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, and even now, it's like, what do you guys want me to do? Like, let's have fun. I don't have like dream characters, but when I watch that show, I was like, I love this show. Like this show it hits all my buttons. And Reacher, by the way, did too. Like a big dumb action sort of like. It's kind of self-aware of what, you know what I mean? Like kind of self-aware what's doing. It's like, oh, and there's like there's emotional elements. Like that's my favorite stuff. And like, yeah, James Gunn's like, I think we do very similar things. I felt the same way with Rick and Morty too. It's like, it does similar things. It's like, it's tropey. It's like, but it's family. Like there's more going on and it's dumb, but it's smart. And I feel that way about Peacemaker and James Gunn. So like when, someone, you know, I got that job, right? I'll say it. I'll talk about it.
It was a tweet, right?
I got it because someone tweeted it. Yeah, someone tweeted it. And I was like, oh, I would kill it because it's literally what I do. It's literally a big, dumb guy who's got problems, but the problems are more interesting than him. And yet he's, you know, going to fight a gorilla.
Yeah.
And so I was like, ha, ha, ha. But I was like, no, I could do this. Like, this is the one superhero thing I know I could do. And so I did. I am. I think that's a really good series. I think I just read lettered issue 3. It's good. Stevie and Jordy are so good. I mean, like to have like Steve Pugh, I could not ask. I mean, you couldn't ask for someone better on that book. He's perfect. Some of the options, because my thing, and has been for a while, because I've worked with cartoonists. Like Chris Schweitzer, I think is one of the best cartoonists. He's my best friend. I think as a technician, I don't think people will understand how good he is. And before that, I worked with Erica, who is the same. Her, by the way, Parasocial, if you haven't read it. Have you seen Parasocial yet?
It's not out yet.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if you got hookups.
I get advanced stuff, but I'm very bad at reading PDFs.
It's really good. It's really good.
I'm still print boy.
I'm with you. Make sure you get that. It's really good. It's better than their last book. But she's so good. And like people would be like, kind of cartoony. And I'm like, I need someone, and even Artyom, kind of cartoony on I Hate This Place. And I've been like, hey, I want not cartoony for like one book. because I want to see what people react to it. To like when the art looks like the art, because the direct market is very specific about what they want art to look like, right? And so Steve is that. Steve is a it's superhero comic that's funny, and he gets timing. And have you seen the picture of like of Peacemaker crying, like from issue 3? I think it's like he's so good. He just nails it. He's exactly what that book needs to sort of like shore me up, right?
I think so just to give listeners a quick spiel about what Peacemaker Tries Hard is all about, it's your DC Black Label series with artist Steve Pugh, colors Jordi Belair, and letter Rebecca Carey. The solicit for number 1 is insanely long, so instead I'm just going to give listeners the gist of what it's about. Peacemaker gets out of the Suicide Squad, and when he realizes everyone thinks he sucks, it takes the love of a dog for him to feel as if he has value, at which point he's like soft John Wick in that his dog is kidnapped, and he ends up being dragged into a heist planned by 2 ridiculous supervillains. That's the short version. I want to talk about Steve a little bit more, just because I think Steve, the interesting thing about Steve is there are a few artists who are good. Like, there's a lot of artists who are good at really specific things. Steve is good at everything. He's very versatile, and he's very good at comedy, and he's very good at character acting, which I think that's something he shares. His storytelling and character acting share a lot with Erica and with Chris.
For sure.
I do think it's interesting. It's like, have you found anything he can't draw well yet? Because that's one of the things I think, I don't even know if that's possible. I mean, did you read this Flintstones book? It's unbelievable.
Yeah, the Flintstones. I mean, that's where I first heard of him. And when they were naming, they're like, "Oh, we're going to put Steve Pugh." I'm like, I don't know who that is. I don't know who anyone is. Don't be offended. Who's in. I don't know who anyone is unless I've worked with you. And I was like, oh, he did Flintstones. I'm like, oh no, that dude would be great. That's exactly what I want, because it looks like a comic book, but he clearly knows how to do things that aren't a traditional comic book. He's great. There's nothing. There's been no point to date where I was like, can we change that? And there's, it's Mark Ellerby was similar. He was my artist on Rick and Morty, where I never had to explain anything. I never had to which is generally, I mean, it's probably a failure of the script, but I never had to be like, oh no, like this. They get it and they elevate it. Like there's little things he does that elevate it. Steve's great. I'm very lucky. Jordy's great. Obviously, Jordy's a goat. No one's gonna say anything about. Yeah, you can't say that about Jordy.
If you ever get the chance, you should read Harley Quinn Breaking Glass. Steve did the art on that, and it is like a tour de force. It is unbelievable. But I did want to ask about this book. So they reached out to you because of the retweet. They thought you were a good fit. What was DC's pitch to you initially? Like, did DC have an idea of what they wanted to go for, tonally speaking, or was that all you?
I can't recall. I think there was like, I mean, they wanted to put some. I don't know how much I can say.
Sure.
I'm going to say things, and they'll be like, that's not exactly right. But I know at one point something was said, like they wanted to find a place to put Garth Ennis's one shot in a trade. There's part of sort of the logic, and they want something to come out when the new season would be coming around, basically, to tie, which is smart, which is which is what all these guys should be doing. And I don't remember them saying we want it totally to be like the show, but I said it has to be as close to the show as I'm allowed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And by that account, like there's a reason why the book opens as it does, which is with there's 2 people at the grocery store talking about how the sort of movie version of a comic is never the same. But gosh, why is that? Like there's no Eagly, there's no Vigilante, and there's a reason why I can't use that. But I know for me, if I picked up a Peacemaker book, especially after that show, I'm like, where's Vigilante? Where's Eagly? Like I want the things that make that show. And it's like I can't use them, so I set it up. But for me, whenever I get these opportunities, again, Peacemaker is very much in my wheelhouse, but I want the thing to be more of the thing I like. And so I can't imagine, and this is not me, I can't even think of, but Green Arrow that Peacemaker is in now, Peace Wrecker and Peacemaker, I think it's Green Arrow, I don't know. I think the writer on it's really good. I haven't read it, I don't read it, but if you love the show and you pick that up, I bet you're not getting that Peacemaker.
Right.
Like, you're going to be like, what the fuck is this? And to me, as a fan of an appreciator, like I want more of the same. And so for me, it's very much endeavoring to sort of be like, give them that. And it's what I do. So it's like it's perfect for me. Rick and Morty is the same way, though I feel differently about it in 2023 than we did 2018 or whatever, obviously. But it's like, man, it's so nice to play in this world because I love the world and I want to make more of the world. I don't want to make my version of that world. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to give the people more. And so Peacemaker is very much like, I can do that. And it'll be great. And the people who love that will buy it. And the people who love that would tell, like, oh, you like the show, you should check out the comic. And they'll buy the trade. And like, that's all you want. it's just people like, I made season 2 of Peacemaker. It's not, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like if you like it, there's more. And I always think like for me, and as we said earlier, like with your very nice compliments, like I've always looked for certain things, right? And I always say like, man, if they're like, hey, the creative team from Goonies is making a new movie, I'd be like, I'm buying it. I'm seeing, let me go, let's go. And it could be terrible, but it's like those guys made a thing I like, and because I like the thing, I want more. Or Goonies 2 by the same whatever. I'm gonna check it out because it's like I like that product and I want more of that product, and only so much exists. Even if you love Spider-Man, right? Only so much exists, right? And I love being sort of like the shepherd to that, and I want to. So to me, it's very much like we needed to be as close to the show. I don't remember at any point them being like, "That's really what an original idea! What a great, unique idea!" I'm sure they're like, "Yeah, that's exactly what we should do." And it was just trying to is making it get as legally close as we could.
I do think it's interesting though, because like the show has kind of like exactly what I want out of a show in a lot of ways, in the sense that it's funny, it's action packed, and it's also like very emotional.
Yes.
And those I think are three things that you do really well. And like that's one of the things I think is interesting about Peacemaker Tries Hard is it does a very good job with like tonal balance. Like this is a comic where you can fit in a scene where a giant hyper intelligent ape and Peacemaker can rock out to, I had to Google this, John Constantine's band from Hellblazer, Mucous Membrane, where the same two characters can tour the latter's collection of helmets. A brutal action scene that also features kittens under threat, which I was very nervous about, and a sequence of panels where a dog curls up in Peacemaker's lap and in many ways changes the direction of his life. That 3-panel well, I guess it's really 4-panel sequence. The way that Steve did that was one of the best moments in like the last 10 years of comics in my book. It was incredible.
He nailed it.
Each of those work incredibly well, all in the same product. That's a lot to balance. Do you have an approach to achieving that balance, or is that just like feel-based?
Someone asked me that a long time ago, and it's like I don't know. That's just the thing that I do. Like that's just I don't know. Like I can tell when it's wrong and I change it, but it's usually like there's something about how I pace a story in my head, like all that stuff happens. It's just how I play ball. I wish I think there's a formula, or I try to do this and that. That's just me. I don't know. That's the one thing I'm like, I don't know the answer to because I just do it. That's just if it's big, dumb action and there's heart being pulled. So a lot of people ask like, how did you do? Because the pacing on I Hate This Place, there's a lot happening too, but it's also, to me, it's all like it's a one day at a time, right? Like there's something about everything being sort of one day at a time that you pace it in a way that it's like a 24-hour window, even though it's not necessarily the case in my head. Mm-hmm. So it's like there's ups and downs and there's lulls, and like the lulls set up things up. I don't know, man. It's just how I do it. Yeah. I wish I was like I have a formula, but that's just like I think about like Matt Damon. Like, you just play ball, right? Like some people just play ball.
I do think it's interesting though, because like some of the stuff too. Here's a good example: the Peacemaker helmets. Did you come up with all the names for them?
Yeah,
you did. Okay, yeah, because
but he went crazy on the designs for it.
Oh yeah, exactly. I have no idea how like the underwater one works or like the Bane voice one works. I would pick the Bane voice one personally because I think it'd be hilarious. Also, it seems like a lower chance of killing unless the Bane voice kills people. But it is really interesting to think about how a lot of this stuff though is like it's a perfect storm of all of your complementary skills. It's like you and then Steve takes it to the next level. I'm curious though. This is a Black Label book. You can get away with a lot of things that you couldn't get away elsewhere, namely cursing. That's the obvious one. But I am interested in, does it being out of continuity allow you to get away with things that you might not be able to otherwise? And I say that knowing that you don't have a lot of comparisons. It seems like it should, right?
I bet it does. There's never like, don't do that because of continuity. That for sure.
There is no continuity.
There's no continuity. And I do think like, I was asked like, hey, what do you think happened? I was asked several weeks ago, the series was done. Like, what do you think happened to so and so? And I'm like, oh, you know, I was like, does it matter? Like, does it matter what happened to so and so? But it's like, no, they're probably not gone. Who knows? But for like that Marvel book, there was like, oh, on my first, they're like, oh, you can't use this location, you can't use this, and I'm like, what? Like, like what are you talking? Like, these aren't real. Like, these are minor, nothing. Like. NPC characters, right? Like,
right.
Who cares? And so there was enough of that. I'd be like, all right, well, we could probably figure. It's so funny because I was like, well, it doesn't have to be that character. Like, it could be a different character. Does that matter? I just need this event to happen, and like, oh, this and that, and it's funny because even they're like, they said it doesn't matter. Like, at once I made like, are we sure we can't do this? They're like, they don't care anymore. I'm like, what? Like, all that continuity stuff. And I had I actually talked to Chip Zdarsky, and I'm not going to tell his stories, but how do you deal with notes? And he told me a story about how he on one of his books, and he has so many, it's tough to say which one it could be, that he had like a character appear on like the last page, which means to me they are for sure important for the next issue. Like they are a major character in the next issue. And they planned these books out for how he's doing it, not me, like years in advance, right? Like there's a roadmap.
Right.
And so he's doing this issue, which is not the first, second, third issue, probably. Like they're like, oh, you can't use that character because of this. And he's like, one, you knew about this a year ago. And two, but I was like, I don't know how you do that. But that's for sure, like, and like that goes back to there's new problems, right? There's always something new. Once you get to the point where you're like, okay, publishers will publish me, which is like the biggest part, right? Then it's like, oh, well, then there's all these other problems. Like it just keeps, there's always something. But so yeah, I didn't have to deal with any of that. I wish I knew what I could tell, because like we went through potential animals besides Bruce Wayne. Like Bruce Wayne was sort of like the last result, and they're like, oh, you can't use that character. You can't use that character. And I'm like, all right, well, we'll make a new one.
Let's just invent a dog. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll name him Bruce Wayne, because I think that's hilarious.
I don't know. One thing I really like about Black Label is Black Label isn't really existing in continuity, but it is kind of existing within like our collective consciousness of what DC Comics are.
They said to me what they want to do basically. If I'm saying, I'm worried I'm going to say something like, don't say that to people. But I thought this was really interesting because it made perfect sense to me at the time. They're like, we want basically to make The Killing Joke. We want to be that book. It's not necessarily canonical, but it's critical and it's big and it's major. For like, that's what each book they want to be, is basically The Killing Joke. And I'm like, that's really interesting. And when at the time I was like, I don't know, trying to wrap my head around it. And so when they said it to me, I'm like, oh, that makes a ton of sense. That makes perfect sense to me, right? And that became canon, right? I mean, are they changed canon to sort of like represent what happened in that book, at least with Barbara Gordon. So it's like, it's interesting because it's not canonical, but like we all know Bruce Wayne's going to show up in like DCU, right? Like surely he is
the dog,
and I'm gonna get $1.
Get it, $1. I do think it's really funny. Like you have that where in Peacemaker you have Bruce Wayne who's been dog napped. I guess you have a dog who's been dog napped, and then you immediately brought out. This is a quote: the Death Trap diagnostic device, which is a bag of kittens that these supervillain, the construction team supervillains, the demolition team were using to test the death trapdoor. I think it's really funny that you have this book where I'm like perpetually worried about the animals, and then the next book you're doing is a Pet Avengers book where I presume that they will also be under threat. But it is kind of funny. It like we talked about this before. You have all these dogs in your books. It seems like you're kind of you're like accidentally on an animal kick. I mean, the Pet Avengers is very much in your face animals. There's no real getting around that.
No, it's all pets. It's all pets. Yeah, no, every book I'm doing right now has a dog in it. Every book, which is I hate this place does it, but every book I'm doing right now, Peacemaker, Pet Avengers, unannounced book, have pets in it. So 3 books. Before that, I did Where Monsters Lie, has a dog in it. And I think almost every book I've done, I've resisted the urge to put a dog in it. There's a dog in Mars Attacks. His name is Butthead. I did Dead of Winter, which is about a dog fighting zombies.
It's a really good book.
I love dogs. But I feel like I'm at the point, it's like we're like, oh, every book you do has a hitman in it. Whereas like every book I do has pets in it. So after Pet Avenger, I'm gonna try not to put any pets in a book for like a year.
But why? Do you?
You don't want to be the guy, because here's the thing. At some point, the dog becomes cursory, and you don't want the pet to ever be cursory. You want everything to serve a function. You know what I mean? It's not just like I'm gonna put a pet in there to put a pet into it.
I will say though, people do like animals a whole lot, and the fact that they're under threat also makes people very invested in their survival. That's probably difficult though, because like I have to admit, when I got to the part with the kittens, I'm like, I swear to God, this Kyle Starks kills these cats, we're canceling the podcast. I do think it's really funny that you got the chance at a Pet Avengers book, Marvel's Unleashed, and the first thing you did was add D-Man's dog, which at least as far as I know did not previously exist.
It's not necessarily D-Man. So again, I don't know if I signed an NDA, but it is D-Dog. They are wearing D-Man's mask for sure.
Okay, so it's not necessarily his pet, but it is a D-Dog version. It's a dog version of D-Man.
It's a dog that's wearing D-Man's mask, and that's all I can, because I think it's such a good character, and I think it's such a good payoff for what the D stands for.
Oh my God.
I think they're great. Some of that of like why is there a new character is because I needed to do things that current characters weren't able to do. And so I made Dog to serve multiple functions, story based and sort of like, you know, to make the story very much a Cal Stark story.
Yeah.
D-Dog. Also, I love D-Man.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, D-Man's your guy.
I like D-Man a lot. That's not coincidental, but at the time, I was like, this would be funny. I mean, that's like what I was like, this is funny, but it's not, again, that's not a comedy book. It'll probably end up being nominated for Best Humor Publication because it is funny. Because like I can't help myself, right? I just can't help myself. It has funny elements to it, but it is a superhero. It's a serious superhero comic book with the dog and a frog and a cat. It's not a cat, it's a flerken.
Yeah,
and a bird.
If and when you do a sequel, I'm just throwing this out there. 2 words: stilt cat. Boom, millions right there.
You know what's so funny is like they're like, who do you want? And you kind of go around because they have opinions. You know what I mean? Like, so I know originally. Hey, I'll say this. I hope I don't get in trouble. Originally, I had Speedball's cat in it. Because in all the Pet Avenger stories, Speedball's cat is the most charismatic. It has a fully formed personality, which is that it's just agitated all the time. And I can appreciate that. I'm agitated all the time. So to be like, this character has anything that had a personality, can I use this? Can I use this? And they're like, no. They're like, no, you can't use that. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I guess I have to make personalities for all these characters, which I did. I had to do because I'm a character-driven storyteller, and it's a bird and a flerken and, you know, a dog and a space dog. You know what I mean? It's tough.
I mean, that's probably why you got Lockjaw kidnapped. Lockjaw doesn't even talk, so that helps out a lot.
Lockjaw is very much the Peacemaker Bruce Wayne in many ways of the story, but part of that also is because Lockjaw is OP, and he's tough to ride around. People don't get that. Like, that's legit. And by the end of the story, like, that's a character that whenever he shows up and people don't go, to me, and this is kind of what Marvel wanted. They're like, Donny Cates started to do an arc in one of the Thors, I think, where it was Throg and Bats the dog, of course. It has to be Bats the dog, Lockjaw, and like 2 Asgardian crows. And they're like, oh, Marvel's like, we love the idea of the Pet Avengers not being like a shtick, like not being like this like bit, like being like actual, like a unique part of this superhero universe. And I'm like, yeah, that's a really interesting challenge, and I'm up for it. But like, Lockjaw is OP. Like, Lockjaw is so powerful. He's story breaking, and I went by the end of that 4-issue run for people to go, like, when Throg and Lockjaw show up, people like whomever you are, you should be like, oh, some stuff's about to go down. Yeah. And those other characters, even I had to do all this research. Chewie the Flerken in Kelly Sue's run, they're like, the Flerken is one of the 50 most dangerous species in the universe. Like, and to be like, to show that, but also like to give them personalities, because that's more interesting to me than the fight necessarily, is the personal sort of struggles and journeys. And to find out is a great challenge. But yeah, I had to take, you have to pause on Lockjaw, because legitimately a dog strong enough to hold the thing still, which he did in his almost first appearance, I think, is a really strong dog. Like, that's a really strong dog. That dog can teleport at will interdimensionally. Like, that's a tough character. Like, that's a tough hero. And Throg, and I think he might have been written differently under Walt Simonson, but the thing with Throg is that he's basically like 1/8 of Thor. 1/8 of Thor beats everything else. Like, everything else, right? And so that, like, to show that, and Donnie did a really great job with that, with Throg in that Thor run. I don't know if you read that. I read it for research, obviously.
Nick Klein doing a Throg is unbelievable.
He's like knocking the teeth out of dudes. It's like, that's the Throg you want to see. You want to see, and the thing is, like, Throg is like a nice guy. Like, that's the thing that makes it so great. It's like, oh, he's a nice guy, but like, he can whoop butt. It's a really interesting challenge, and like, because of these sort of OP characters, I need another character, and because certain characters are going to be timeless, you know, you need something that can suffer a little bit more than everyone else can. I think it's going to be really good. I just turned in issue 3. I think it's fun. I think it's a unique take on these characters that's not... I think a lot of people do unique takes on things, and they dismiss the past, and that's not what I want to ever do.
Right.
I want people to go, I love Throg, I love Lockjaw, I love Chewie, the Flerken. No one loves Red Wing, but I hope they do after this book. I hope people are like, man,
The Red Wing fans are gonna kill you after this.
no,
You're gonna get
listen,
cooked.
I'm gonna tell you right now, if there are Red Wing fans listening to this, I'm about to blow your mind because that's a character who's never had that's never been given anything, and I give it a lot. I give them a lot. I think if you like those characters, you'll be like, this is great. This does what I want these characters to be, and it's been a great challenge. And I think it's working out. I think it's gonna be really good. The artist, I have first page inks, is unbelievably good. It's I don't know how to say their name. Jesus Curvas. They're great. Like they're too good. They're too good to be drawn a Pet Avengers book. So it's exactly what you want.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Coming on the heels of the towering success that was Matt Kint and Louis LaRosa's Megalith on Kickstarter, the Guerrilla Comics publisher that is Bad Idea is back in the lab, cooking up other comic book madness for you all to enjoy. What's next for them? I have absolutely no idea. Nobody tells me anything. Maybe a nap? I hear Kickstarters are pretty exhausting. But there's undoubtedly something new and bonkers on the horizon, so keep an eye on Bad Idea at badideacorp.com and on their varying social media presences at @BadIdeaHello. And now, back to the show. Well, let's get into your original stuff. I want to talk about I Hate This Place really quick because it is wrapping with its second arc. Actually, this morning I got a press release or something showing a preview of the 10th and final issue.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's interesting about this arc is you've had to condense your entire story into basically the final 5 issues. And it is wall-to-wall bananas. I mean, I don't want to get into the details of what's happening because that's spoiler territory, but there's a lot going on and it's a lot of really big things. How has that affected your writing? Has it just required you to speed up the story and get through the key beats in the process?
It's a little faster than so when we started that book, it was under the pretense that it was an ongoing.
Right.
If sales sort of allowed it, and sales have allowed it, that when we were about to start in the second arc, they were like, because I was like, can I get 15? Like, I want to do 15.
Right.
I could have done 50. Rutherford Ranch was it's such a sandbox of opportunity for storytelling, and Gabby and Trudy are so great, and the minor characters are so great. To me, like I'm really fond of those characters and what I created, and so we can't guarantee an arc after the second arc. So I was like, oh, I guess I gotta wrap 10 issues into 5 basically. So it's faster than I want, but I just read issue 10. I think the pacing on those all of them are good. I think the pacing's good. It's a little fast. I would have liked to spend more time with like Trudy's family, sort of the murder cult, home invasion stuff that was in issue 6 and 7. I would have liked to have spent more time with that. And originally that would have been half of the second arc. Like it would have been more like 3 issues rather than 1.5. So it's not like I didn't give up that much, and I had to pivot where a character who didn't play a role sort of became a role because of time, and I think it worked out better. I would have liked to have done 10 issues instead of 5, but I think it's good. I think it reads good. I think it reads great. But it's like I said, I kind of like the idea of everything happening in one day, and because of that, you have to sort of allow it room to breathe a little bit, and it is nonstop. But I think it escalates it. The tension is very high because it is so rapid paced. But it's not optimal. But here's the thing: comics in general. It's when I did I Hate This Place. It's so funny because they're like 6 issues, and I'm like, oh, I have 5 issues in my head. Mm-hmm. It's broken into 5 issues for the first arc, and there are 6 issues, and I'm like, I don't know what that'd be. It's 5 issues, and I'm like, okay. And then when we get to do the second arc, they're like, well, we don't know if there's gonna be a third arc, and I'm like, oh, okay, 6 issues, and they're like, no, it's 5 issues. they're like, no, it's 5. And then I sort of like broached, and I was like, oh, 5 issue miniseries. I'm like, yeah, we kind of want to do 4 now. The Pet Avengers is 4, and I'm like, oh, really? We're just getting down to nothing. Like we're just shrinking them up. And comedy, humor, and action and character stuff takes real estate, you know. And so every time it shrinks up, it's like, oh, I'm losing character bits, because that's what it sacrifices, right? I like to read just the way I like to watch. I like choreographed fight sequences. I don't do Kirby style, which is 3 big, cool, boom, boom, boom panels, right? And you're like, they won. I like for there to be a story within those fights. It tells something about these characters, or it tells something about the opposition. And whenever you go smaller and smaller, like that's what goes away. It's all the little things that make it uniquely mine. Are the advantages of why you want to read a Kyle Starks book. Maybe these little things, like that's what you cut, because plot can't go, right? Like plot can't go. So it's so funny they get shorter and shorter. But I feel like feel like I'm adjusted to it. Okay, that's another example of there's always new problems.
Yeah, well, and also I've talked to writers before who've said things like, obviously it's not ideal to like lose issues or to drop an arc or anything like that, but at the same time, sometimes constraints can be creatively fertile. Like it can drive you to do interesting things. It is difficult because like a lot like what you're talking about. I mean, whether you're talking about horror, action, or comedy, all three of those things you need space to
For
be
sure.
able to like make them really have the impact you want. And so when you lose that, that is definitely a challenge, and it definitely has to foreground plot at that point. But you have done a really good balance on it. It is, I mean, it is just like bananas though. The last two issues, 8 and 9, where it's like, I'm not going to get into it, but it's just like
A lot happened.
it goes to places where I didn't expect it. I was like, Haunted Ranch, and now I'm like, wait, where are we? When are we? What?
Yeah. Oh.
Oh, but anyways, yeah, it's a hell of a thing. But you have done a good job balancing it. I was just talking to Kelly Thompson on the podcast about, she wrote a Hawkeye book, and she was talking about how, I think she said originally it was supposed to be an ongoing, and then it became 12, and then it became 10, then it was 11, then it was 12 again. And it's just like, the problem too is like when it becomes a moving target.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's another problem. And Kelly has privileges in the right word, but Kelly can do more about that than someone who's just writing their first book and it's Hawkeye too, right? Like that person's just happy. It's just like it's things are all different. I don't know the situation, but probably I've been where it's like, oh, it's gonna be 15, now it's 10. But I've also been like, can I get 2 more pages? Like, can I get 2 more pages? Like, and they'll be like, yeah. So like, can we not do this? Like 12 issues will be strong. They're gonna look at sales and be like, we can do 1 more issue because the trade's gonna be better because of it. But it's all complicated stuff, man. But I'm telling you, like they're down like Pet Avengers was 4, and I'm like, that's tight. But they're like, oh, the first issue is 30 pages, and I'm like, oh well, okay, that's better. I mean, like if we're gonna do 4 issues, can we do 32-page first issues? Is that possible? Like that's better if we're gonna keep doing shorter and shorter to have like either a big finale or a big starter, right? Probably a big starter makes more sense. But
I do think it's interesting though with I Hate This Place. You do have Benito Cereno does a write up in the back.
Yeah,
and then this
great essays.
Yeah, and then you had this week you had a fake excerpt, well, a real excerpt from a fake podcast, Taters Raiders.
Some sort of potato chip.
Yeah,
it's called They asked me what the name of it was because they're like, should we put it in the beginning? I'm like, I was like, don't put it in there because I don't want people to know that they talk about potato chips till the end. But I think the name of the podcast would be A Crisp Conversation.
Oh, is that the name of it? I thought they said Taters Radars or something at the end.
They say what's on the taters, what's on the tater radar. Like it's a segment. Like it's a segment of the strip where they talk about hot new potato chips. I don't know. So when we started in the back matter is hard, and I think it's important. And I like for Assassinations, I answered letters like the characters. But for this one, I did the strips, right? Like I did
I love the strips.
Dabby and Trudy before the ranch because I like they're fun to be around and to imagine how they sort of existed before. And each of those back ones kind of either plays off that issue or sets up the next issue. Like Gabby, something happens to Trudy that I set up in a preview. That's not accidental, right? Like with me, I need to establish certain things. And it gave me like a little more space. I like back matter. I'm not that creative. And after coming off 6 Sidekicks, which Chris and I did together, and I came up with the ideas of what sort of each one would be. Like one was a Reddit forum, and one was just like a Rolling Stone interview, and one was an oral biography. But like something about having Chris around and involved, because he loves that stuff. He's like, no, we got to have great back matter that no one's ever going to see. And they put it in the trade, which is like bow. Like it's so amazing they put in the trade. So like I feel like some remorse that there wasn't more like sort of like fun, exciting back matter that my bandwidth controls those things. So for this next 5, especially 6 through 9, I was like, I want to do something in addition because I didn't know people like those strips. We did C2E2 last year, and I hate this place. I'm like, thank you. Schweitzer didn't sit next to me. It's the first show he hasn't sat next to me in years. And at the end of the show, he's like, man, people kept coming over to me and saying they love those strips. And I was like, oh, man, I wasn't going to do them anymore because they're a lot of work. They're free work, and I wasn't going to do them anymore. He's like,
when you were on last, you said I was the first person who had mentioned the strips before.
Yes. Like, no one ever said anything. So I was like, I'm just doing all this extra work, and it's like, no one cares. But I love back matter, and I had a couple good ideas. I did. The lady who owned the house, they have like a panic room full of VHS tapes. So I like they had around like a journal that was like, so she knew which ones are good.
The
And I
pirating.
did. She did her she did her pie rating, and I did. What was the other one? I did another one. The other one was good too, but I can't think of what it is.
What I was saying though is like those. That's like 5 pages that exist in the book. That's not real estate you can use for comics though, because they have to pay for like the art and have to pay for all this stuff. Is that correct?
Yes,
So that's like secondary stuff.
yes. You don't get paid for that. Let me rephrase that. Kyle Starks doesn't get paid for that. Somebody out there is maybe doing back matter, and they are getting paid for it. Or because I always think what I always think about with back matter is I think about how Brubaker, when he's doing those noirs, had like the foremost expert on noirs, like writing essays, and I'm like, that's what you want. Like that's what you something that's so additive. You don't like character sketches are fine, but it's like that's like it's not the same as like getting like more story or something like fleshing up the story. I wish I remembered the other one I was really proud of. Oh, it was about the new season of Dante Howitzer's
Oh, right.
the like post mortem season of Dante Howitzer's Ghost Show, and like what happened to Dante Howitzer. Like that stuff's fun. And I think people like those characters enough, like Itchy. Like what's up with Itchy? Like what? Because there's only so much in the book. But for the most part, those characters were fuller to me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like you only use what you have to use, or like what's good for the story. But like Itchy did a bunch of awful things before he showed up on that ranch. Of which it's clear, I think, from the story.
Yeah, he's a very bad guy. I do want to say I was very proud of myself that had figured out that the what?
To know where you're going.
Oh, I was very proud of myself that I guessed that the big turn at the end of number 9 of what happens with Trudy tied into issue number 8 strip, and like you kind of have alluded to that being the case. I mean, canonically, she does have a lot of glasses. She must be super blind. I mean, unbelievably blind.
She didn't see very good, I don't think.
No,
I think she like I know like for that particular bit over that 15, like that would have been like because I wear glasses, and like all horror is in many ways you go, what is a universal horror? What is a personal horror that people can relate to? And so I had sort of it would have been more than just basically an issue turn of her not being able to see and sort of because Trudy's whole thing is like she's so prepared. And she's a survivalist. She's ready for any situation except for this ranch. And so sort of for me, it's like, well, what would be the word? Like a helplessness is sort of the one thing that she can't prepare for because she's always been ready. There's nothing that could have happened to Trudy that like before and I showed that in those I think in those strips before, Trudy's always ready for it. And to be put into a ghost situation, you don't know what to do. Like there's no prepper magazine that told you what to do if ghosts showed up or if there was giant monsters and it's a helplessness for her. And so the glass is the same thing. It's like Trudy, her biggest threats are something happens to Gabby, which is number 1. That's all she cares about. That's number 1. And 2, she's in a situation that she can't solve, that she's not prepared for. And so not having glasses is one of those things. It's those 2 things. Even being back, she gets sort of captured by her family. That's probably number 3. Being helpless to her family because that's what her childhood was. All that stuff's really interesting to me. I wish if I did 15, I think it would have been a more substantial scene. There's little things that get rushed, but I suspect, and it limits sort of the effect of it. But if anyone's reading glasses and they get to the last page of issue 9, they're going to go, oh, that sucks. Like that sucks so bad. I know my daughter is like 15. She's blind as a bat. And you see with her glasses, you're like, what are you doing? You got to figure out a way to get through this world.
I do think it's interesting too. Like, I mean, with I Hate This Place, you had to make an adjustment to shrink it down. With Where Monsters Lie, I'm sure you can't say much about this, but it ends very much with an open-ended conclusion.
Well, I think all horror movies end with an open, like they all need their sequel, right?
That's extremely, extremely open-ended. They do end open-ended, but this was like, it was like basically yelling at us. Like, I mean, there's literally, what is the place called?
Wilmhurst Music.
There's a 2. This is literally a sequel.
Yeah, but doesn't it make sense that there would be more than one? Like once you get through it, doesn't it make sense that this would be the only place? There's other monsters in the ones you saw here.
Oh yeah.
The thing about that type of ending is, it's in Assassination. It's in Six Sidekicks. There's something about ending things that will there like they put Skybound loves put volume one on their trades, especially for like Assassination Six Sidekicks. Like neither Erica nor Chris nor I had any expectations to do a volume two, but if the timing was right, if the interest was there, we probably would. Erica and I joked there was like when's volume two coming out? Like when they make the movie, it'll be like Kingsman. Like suddenly there's a volume two also. You know what I mean? But that's wide open too. Like the ending to that is like clearly setting up something else. There's something about that ending that I like because I love these characters so much. And the thing is, that's the full story to me. That's the Where Monsters Lie story. That's Assassination. That's Sidekick. Or Six Sidekicks. People are like, when would you do Sex Castle? I'm like, I did it. Like to me, that's the whole thing. I could do more with that character because the characters are good, but like that's their story. It's a different story. I have to figure it out. But the thing with horror movies, and I think of Where Monsters Lie because it's again basically one day. It's like 6 hours. It's like a 6 hour.
It's a really intense 6 hours.
Yeah, it's an intense 6 hours, and that's the type of thing where it's like I really got to use the space because I made it one day. It's basically one day, and I got to do all the space. Is that all horror movies should have a bad sequel? So fingers crossed. It did sell out. It was very popular. There is another site. What's going to happen to all these great characters? Who knows? I can't say. I can't say at this time.
I have to say, if I was being tortured in the way that the kid is in the fourth issue, I would definitely not be razzing my torturer about whether or not something is or is not a puzzle. But also, we're just built different, I guess.
I think he's having some. I think there's some shock. There's some shock involved.
Yeah. It's a fair question. They're not puzzles.
They're not puzzles. There's certain things like Professor Puzzleman is on the list of probably like my personal favorites, like Terry Komodo, Professor Puzzleman, Dante Howitzer probably. Even though Dante Howitzer is like the tamest, there's something about a big dumb guy even though he's kind of painful. Anyway, I love Professor Puzzleman, and even Professor Puzzleman's like first appearance, he messes up and like he was doing tortures at Wilmhurst, which he should have, and some got away, and they're like, "Did you get all of them?" And he's like, "Yeah, they couldn't solve my pistol puzzle," which means he just shot him. But he's so dumb at puzzles, like it makes it even funnier to me. Like he's not even good at puzzles, makes it so much funnier to me. So all that's just a funny bit, but I can't believe I'm blank.
Fuck Tarkington.
Yeah, well, fuck Tarkington's a class. Him and Dave.
Oh, Dave.
Dave was a character who became one of my favorite characters. And usually it's always like that. It's never the main character. It's always like three guys in, and you're like, oh, I kind of really like I hate this place. Like I love Garth and Big Mike, and those are the guys who just work on the property.
Oh, I love them too. Mermaid.
That's another the mermaid stuff. I love Big Mike because Big Mike and Garth sort of combined to be a character that I love to have. I was gonna say 100 Cat, Big Sis. Like I love those characters. From Rocky Mountain. There's always like I love these. There's characters I really like, and I would like to spend more time with. And when they asked us to do another chapter of Assassination, which we did for Skybound X, like we were like, it's fucking Dave. Like there's no question what we're gonna do.
I do think it's funny that it's just basically Erica's husband, except for a cartoon version of him.
She drew. Here's the thing: Assassination has quite a few cameos aesthetically that look like people we know, and that's not.
Well, and fuck Tarkington's Chris, right?
Yeah, there's a couple others. There's a couple others in there too, of people who are just like you're like, and it's like, and some of it's like, oh, because the thing is like, oh, here's all these characters, and I was like, this one looks like this character, and this one looks like just real people, not because I'm like, this is who would play the character, which I don't even do anymore. But at the time, it's like it's an action movie, and it's like this is who they would be, and it's so funny when it came. Like Erica did such a good job of like, oh, it is them, but it looks nothing like them. Only I can sort of see like the tangents she made. It's like, oh, yeah, I see how that's so and so. But yeah, she's like, and here's what's funny. I think you've talked to Erica, haven't you, about this before? Where she was like, don't name him Dave. Because like, Dave was a filler name. I just wanted generic guy name.
Yeah.
And she did say to me, don't use Dave. Time passed. So much time passed. Like I didn't change it. Because it could have been anything. It could have been Ryan. You know what I mean? It could have been Chris. It could have been any name. And she sort of ran with it to amuse herself, I think. And also like he was supposed to be like dressed very suburban dad. He's like supposed to be like a very basic bitch sort of guy, which he is. But she gives him this sort of elaborate like costuming because she's like, well, he has money and his wife's buying him nice things. And like even that is so funny. Like that's Erica's genius. It's you could have done it with I could have done it with anybody else.
The moment I knew I loved this series was when there was the shootout in the first issue, and his reaction is just, "It's lit."
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love that. But I got to close with one final question. I did want to ask about, you're a writer, man. This is what you do.
Yeah.
You're a writer, and it's interesting because I don't know if you've done anything where you wrote and drew the book since Old Head or Karate Prom. There might have been something I don't remember, but I mean, but also backups for I Hate This Place, of course. But
It's not the same.
I know you've said that you're expanding something you previously did for Free Comic Book Day, which I assume is Karate Prom, but I could be mistaken. Do you consider yourself a writer above a writer, artist, or cartoonist, or whatever title you prefer now, or does it just not even matter?
I did Louis Sprouse, by the way. That's the last thing that I wrote and drew, which was it's pay what you want. You have to go to my Twitter. There's a link, which is like a 48 page comic I did for Free Comic Book Day. Louis Sprouse Stole My Heart, and I have 2 hours to get it back. That's the full title of that book. I would like to draw something every year, but no one hires me to do that, and I understand that, because my writing is better than my art, and I think there's a wide gap. I think my art only works for my stories, and historically the direct market has not embraced it. So I understand. I am primarily and most desirable as a writer. I would like to still write and draw something every year, but I'm so busy right now. It's not going to be this year. And Old Head was the same. It seems like I go every other year. Every other year, I get time to make something. That's 100% me. No editors, fully unhinged Kyle Starks. That's my happiest. It's the happiest I am, is when I'm doing that. And there's no in between. Writing for other people is very stressful to me. I still do. I'm kind of drawing pages. Like a lot of times I'm like, I need to figure out how I'm like beats, and I still want to feel like a Kyle Starks comic, but I would never ask. I looked at Old Head and I averaged like 8 panels a page or 7.5 panels. I average that. And I don't ever ask these guys to do more than 6. Like if I go to 6, I get nervous because it's like, that's asking them to do a lot of work. And I'll do that. And Chris will do it too. Chris and I just did a story for an anthology, and it's the same. It's like, well, it's 6 panels because I'm writing for you like I'm writing for everybody else now. And he's like, no, it's 10 panels. And I'm like, that's right, it is. So it's great to see that, but I just don't think you can ask. I can't ask for people to do what I would do. So the freedom of getting to do more labor somehow is I love it. So I mean, I don't know what I am. I don't think about it like that. I still refer to myself as a cartoonist more often than not, but it is heading that way. I'll always have stories that I think are maybe not. Oh, what's the word? Like, I don't think you can go, oh, that's fiscally viable. You know what I mean? Like, that idea does seem like something that would sell to a lot, because it doesn't. Like a lot, like I still cannot elevator pitch Old Head. I can't do it. It's just there's too much going on, and to me, there's too many layers, and it's too complicated. And the short version of like ex basketball player fights monsters is not an elevator pitch. That's boring. So like I don't know a good way to sell it, but it's like it's about legacy, and it's crazy. So like that's the stuff that I'm more interested in, is like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know who would draw this or who would publish it. I'm just gonna do it myself.
Yeah.
My wife says it every time, and she never says, God bless her, she never says, you need to go draw a comic. This is still a job, right? Like writing comics is still a job. And because of that, it's work. And being self-employed is awful. Being self-employed with a family is so stressful, and sort of having to fight for what you think is important versus what the publisher thinks is important versus what the artist thinks is important, which sometimes means just what they bothered to do in some instances, as much as they can be bothered. Like that's tough. And then on top of that, it's like your legacy. But even like there's so much stress, it's like it's physically upsetting at times for me. And it's never that way when I'm drawing something. It's when I'm drawing a comic. Karate Prom was the year of the pandemic, and then I did Louis Sprouse the next year. It's just whatever I wanted it to be. And it's the happiest I am because I'm just telling stories, man. The filter is it needs to be right, but there's no other voice that comes in and be like, hey, can you, like, I don't worry about page count. And there's certain things like that also add into it. Like probably the next time I do something, I probably want to do like a series, like a short series, only because Matt Kent said to me, which is very smart. Sex Castle still sells because people they get rid of it and then they get a new one, they get rid of it. And if Rock Candy Mountain was one trade instead of two, I think it would be in the same situation. Because I think it's so good that you go, oh, this is good, this is good. And, I'm hoping Six Sidekicks will be that. I'm hoping Old Head it's asking a lot because how do you sell it? But he's like, oh, Sex Castle, those straight to OGN books only exist for 30 days. And after that 30 days, it either continues to exist or it doesn't. But if you do a 6-issue series and then do a trade, that's a year. That's a year of it existing in people's life. And it's just, to me, that's really interesting. And so it's like, well, now I have to figure out that way. So maybe it'll be less fun the next thing I do. But I do have some series, like, I just don't know. It's like, it's just like I said, it's hard, man. Like, who's the publisher that has the availability to pay an artist? Who's that artist to do this project? That's very important to me. That's different. It's different than whatever. And you just, like I said, new problems every time, right, man? It's tough. It's dumb. That seems like, I'm like, look at this guy complaining about how he's getting opportunities. I'm like, listen, I hear you. It's insane to me. Like, it's crazy to me that I'm getting opportunities that I am getting. It's crazy that publishers are like, hey, we really want you to do. I'm like, really? Like, did you read Sex Castle? Did you read Sex Castle? You like that?
Yeah.
And you want me to do something? Yeah. It's like, listen, I think the answer is yeah, but I know how many that's sold, I guess. Like, Sex Castle is okay. I can't.
I think the ultimate theme of this is the world is catching up with Kyle Starks finally, which I appreciate. But Kyle, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about I Hate This Place, Peacemaker Tries Hard, and everything else. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And you're welcome to all of our listeners that we didn't talk about basketball for 45 minutes.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with cartoonist Kyle Starks. You can find him on Twitter and Instagram at @TheKyleStarks, and his work in I Hate This Place, Peacemaker Tries Hard, and the upcoming Marvel Unleashed. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel. And when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast, as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site, Sketched, at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by following it on Twitter and Instagram at @SketchComic or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Cancel Comics, Scott Place, Darcy Van Polgeest, Kevin Bides, Travis Schmeiser, Tom Evans, Natalie Mockery, Reed Beeman, Kelly Sudaconic, Max Wood, Jeremy Lambert, Brian, Matteo Ciccati, Chris Doré, Nir Levy, Dennis Hoffman, Jason Hussa, Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Uratam, Henry Johnson, Django Boren, James Tynan IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Peachy, Ben Damstead, Rom V, Nick Walker, Patrick Coyle, Isaac Oren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Arb Studios Comics, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Vandeven, Brian, Summit Industries, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Canadian by Proxy, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Chavez, Dan Garino, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, Nick Bennett, Birdcage Comics Cafe, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinckley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Stephen Hall, Philip Myra, Chris Pachalo, Torrin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Wallace Comics and Books, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Ryanwan, Vita Ayala, Akil, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Nick Polito, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Carl McMahon, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Wolfpack for letting me use their song Outro as the show's opening theme, and to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's outro and ad music just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.